I love being on construction sites. I just really loved it. It was a challenge. Sometimes it was really hard what you did. Sometimes it was dangerous. A lot of times it was dangerous. But I've always been someone who liked to work with my hands and do real physical things, and that's what I got to do. And I just loved it. And my name is written on the bottom of various pieces of duct and sheet metal all over buildings all over the Bay Area. Construction-wise, I was a sheet metal worker, but we worked with an organization called Tradeswomen that worked to get women into non-traditional jobs in construction and things like that. And we put out a magazine quarterly, and it was all laid out pretty much by hand back then.
I was the only woman ever in my jobs. I mean, there had been a few women in the union before me, and they kind of gave up. And the people, those of them who were talented began their own businesses. I never wanted to have my own business, so I stuck it through until I finished, and I was actually the first woman in Northern California. It was hard. It was very, very hard. I think I became involved in it because someone gave me the magazine from Tradeswomen, and I was just so excited because I had done a training course and worked briefly in a cabinet making shop in Texas, but there were no unions, and I couldn't be an apprentice. And it's just one of the reasons why I moved to San Francisco, because back then it was much more of a union city. And I guess someone gave me one of their magazines that were really nicely done. And I felt pretty excited to see that somebody else wanted to do the same thing that I wanted to do. And fairly immediately got involved in the work, because it was a small organization, and there weren't a lot of women putting out the magazine and doing the advocacy work and marching in the parades and things like that. So for many, many years, we marched in the parade under the Tradeswomen banner.
Stories written about different trades and different jobs, and about the difference between there were women who worked in construction, union work, and then there were women who were self-employed. We knew one woman who had been a plumber for years and years, and kind of it varied. Both of us ended up doing a certain amount of writing for it. We got some women, we would contact some women who did interesting jobs and say, would they be willing to write something about what they did? And if they weren't, then sometimes we would just interview them and turn that into an article.
We did all the layout. So our dining room, it was before people did that on computers. And so our dining room table contained hundreds of little sentences and words, and we put it all together, and then we had a typesetter, and then we would proof it and take it away. And well, it was fun to have a project and get it done. Ross told a story about something that I thought was just brilliant. I thought she was very brave and creative and wonderful. And when she told this story, I thought, okay, that's the woman I want.
One woman who worked as a janitor over in Tiburon, one of the deckhands, a male deckhand, assaulted her late at night. He continued to threaten her every time he saw her and said that he would finish what he had started. And she was very upset. And we went to the police, we went to the Inland Boatmen's Union, we went to the Ferry Associate, we went everywhere, and they all said, hey, not our problem. So there were 3 of us, and we decided that we would just take it into our hands and make him an offer he couldn't refuse. Finally, after many different ideas, crash and burn, we decided that instead of going to him, we had to get him somewhere where we could carry out this confrontation. And we decided to do it in Golden Gate Park. And in order to get him there, we had set up a fake date and met him in the parking lot of the museum and escorted him down to the Rose Garden, which is still there. I walked him into the Rose Garden. We timed it precisely. It was just dark, getting dark, and these 57 women just came out of the dark and surrounded him, and then just said that you threatening a woman, putting your hands on a woman is never acceptable for any reason, and that if he ever in any way made this woman even uncomfortable again, that he would be sorry, he would regret it. That's the phrase we use. We were trying to be careful. And then that was it. We told him, turn around, go back to your car, and don't cause any trouble or else.
You just sort of assume, even when you're really young, that you're going to grow old with your friends. And like I think I mentioned before, we've just really, at that time in our lives, had not experienced death except for maybe grandparents. So Fred used to come and visit us. So I wrote him and asked him when he was coming back. Was he coming that summer to visit us? And he wrote back this terse little sort of note that said, everything is different now and I'll explain later. But he never did. And a few weeks later, we got a letter from his boyfriend saying that he had died. And it was just really, really shocking. And before that, we had not thought much about AIDS. And then there it was on our plate. So we knew about the Names Project, which was very young at that point. And I talked to Fred's mother and said, would you mind if we made a quilt panel and donated it to the quilt? And she said, yes, I'd rather you didn't. I was going to just let it go. But when I told Joss about it, she made one for me. Secretly. So it was one of the best presents I've ever gotten, and I was completely surprised. So of course we decided to turn it in to them. The new office for the Quilt Project was in a little storefront on Market and Castro. And so we went there. We were very nervous. We didn't know how it would feel. Of course, it felt like ripping our heart out. But the people were lovely, and we felt okay about giving it away. And then, of course, we ended up going to Washington 3 times to be volunteers, setting the quilt up, which was a huge project. And we loved mostly sitting there talking to people about the panels that we had made and our friends had made. And, you know, as years went by, there were more and more panels for people that we knew. And we met just really interesting people there. I think that was the best part of it, just watching the people come around, whole families with their kids. You would have to be an incredibly hard-hearted person to not be moved by that and to not realize that these were ordinary people, some of whom you may have known in your life, or people like people you knew, and that this was a great sadness and a tragedy, and that people, even if their lives were cut off,
what they left behind them in terms of friends and love, and was a lot and was more important than anything in the end.